Today on the show, in my opinion, we are officially in draft season now. The Senior Bowl is behind us. It was played yesterday in Mobile, Alabama, as we are now a week away from the Super Bowl and the end of the NFL season as we know it. And so I know it's early, but I'm going to do my first Seahawks mock draft of the 2024 season. We'll call this one my first Mac mock. Sorry. I take an approach as if I'm trying to fill out the roster in a way that will help new Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald. Let's have some mock draft fun today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell button so you're always notified of new episodes. Same with audio. You can subscribe on Spotify if you want to listen to episodes without ads. Otherwise, I'm on all the platforms. Just subscribe there so that you can never miss an episode. And if you're on Apple, I'm not sure why the other platforms aren't as in tune with this. But if you like what I do on the show here, you can leave a 5-star review. That really helps things. And also, you can buy me a coffee or a beer if you want to support me in the show. Let's get into this. This is fun. It is Sunday morning, February 4th, as I record this. And I wanted to get a show out today because I'm relocating, moving into a bigger place. My lady and I getting a place. Same apartment complex. Won't be as extensive as the last move. But the next time you see me, things will look a little bit different. And so I wanted to get this one out there because it might take a couple of days to switch all of that over. And those of you that follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever, you know how much I like mock drafts. And like may be a gross understatement. It's an addiction. It's a problem. It's a little frustrating this time of year. And I'll give you a couple of disclaimers, a couple of rules, I guess, up front before we get into this, because mock drafts have a way of riling people up. Everybody has their own idea of what they want their team to do, and that's what makes it so much fun, right? And so I want to try to preface some of this ahead of time. First of all, this time of year, we don't really know how the league views these prospects. We have an idea, especially at the top, but the really hardcore scouting hasn't quite been done yet. The combine's in a couple of weeks, and then teams get to interview and get to know these guys better, get to know how they're built, how they think, how they're wired. And so these mock draft simulators are amazing. They really are. We didn't have these things 10 years ago, right? You'd have to get the draft magazines, which are published so far ahead of the process that they're not accurate either. You had to kind of piece together your own mocks. These things are incredible, but they're only as good as the big boards that they use. And I bounce back and forth between Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Network, and even the mock draft database. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. Unfortunately, the Draft Network has kind of fallen apart in the last couple of years since some of their key guys left and went on to other ventures. And so, they used to be the gold standard. I like just the ease of use of the Pro Football Network one. That's what we're going to use today. Pro Football Focus, I feel like in some ways tends to be a little bit more accurate with their grading, in the sense that, the Seahawks don't have a second round pick this year. So by the time we'd get to the third round on Pro Football Focus, sometimes all the guys that I really want to target are gone. And then there's just a lot of depth pieces. But I think it's more realistic sometimes to lean into Pro Football Network because there are surprises in the draft. There are guys that drop unexpectedly. There are guys that go sooner than we expect. And I think that gets reflected a little bit more in how that's built. And so that's what I use today. I also took this approach. I do think that this is a year in which John's going to want some volume. It's his first time as GM of the Seahawks truly controlling the entire roster and not having someone else in the front office who has final say on decisions. We don't know when every time the Seahawks have been on the board for the last 14 years, who was really the driving force behind some of these picks. I think we're not going to discover everything that we need to know or want to know about how John Schneider is going to operate autonomously this draft. It'll probably take a couple of years, but we'll start to see some of those trends from the past, some of those picks that had us scratching our heads. Maybe it'll become more clear that, oh, that was probably a Pete pick. And so, John was known for wanting to trade down earlier in his career, in large part because the Seahawks were always drafting at the end of the first round. If they had their second round pick, I'd say maybe this year they stick at 16 because that's usually where first round grades start to fall off, and you don't want to miss out on a guy. But not having that second round pick, traded for Leonard Williams. I think having a new coach in place, especially someone who's going to be installing new schemes, doing things differently, and looking for a certain type of player, especially on defense, I think John's going to want to take some shots and stock that roster. So I took the trade down approach. That's one thing. Two, he's going to draft a quarterback, whether it's in the first round or not. Unfortunately, this year, because of NIL, this year that once again we had been looking forward to for a while is one that was, I think I said last draft season, wait till next year's draft. It's going to be a lot deeper, a lot more layered. A lot of guys on day 2, day 3. Well, a lot of those guys, knowing that they're fringe guys, have enough value in college, they were able to get paid and they stuck around. And so, guys like Cam Ward and Tyler Van Dyke and Quinn Ewers and Brady Cook. There's a lot of guys, Will Howard, that might have been in that day 2 discussion that decided to stay in school. But John's going to take a quarterback this year, either as a guy that he thinks can be the franchise guy or someone that they can develop. Finding trade partners is always hard, but I think I did. And then before we get into this and I show you the board, one last thing. And I always preface mock drafts this time of year by saying this. It does get lost sometimes, and I'll still get dragged for some of these decisions. It's not always about the name and the actual player in that spot, but it's about the concept and the idea. As we get farther down this list, there are going to be players that I haven't watched play as much. I haven't watched film yet. I haven't had a chance to really dig in on that stuff yet because this is about the time where I would start doing that. I have a database that I subscribe to where I get a lot of all 22 film, and I'll start watching some guys at certain position groups. But with the coaching change and everything that's been happening in the last month, that's been put on the back burner. And so and I'll talk about it as I go through. It's not so much if you don't like this particular player that I take at a certain spot, plug in your own guy at that same position. And then we'll get an idea of how this thing looks as a whole. So let's get into it. First of all, I traded back with Houston to 20, originally to 24, I think Houston has. And then the simulator offered me a little slide back 1 or 2 more spots to 26. But also one other thing about these simulators, they offer you trades, but they're not always accurate. What I do when I make these trades is I use the trade chart. And I think this is one last important point to get into. I didn't mean to stall. But here it is. A lot of you, in some of the discussions we've had about the draft, have said, man, I want to trade back in the first round so we can recoup that second round pick for Leonard Williams. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get a second rounder to move back 7, 8, 9 spots in the first round from 16 to 22, 23. You're not. Go look at the trade charts. First one, Jimmy Johnson was the guy that pioneered all of this, and you can find the Jimmy Johnson NFL trade chart online. But then a guy came along about 10 years ago by the name of Rich Hill and converted that trade chart, took that same idea but analyzed actual draft day trades and draft trades that have happened over the last 7, 8, 9 years. And so it's a little different numbering system, but the idea is the 16th pick has a numerical value. And if you want to trade back to 26, that has a numerical value. You subtract the difference, and then that's about what the difference in those picks are worth. And when you look at it, when you go from 16 to the end of the first round, that difference does not equal a second round pick. And so I would use the chart, look for another team that has draft capital in the right place so that it matches up closely enough. Teams will overpay sometimes. Sometimes teams will get bargains. And Houston made sense. They showed last year that they'll be aggressive in moving up for the right guy. And they still need help in certain areas. I could see them moving up to get a skill position guy to help out CJ Stroud, a running back, perhaps. Some help on that offensive line. But also another difference maker or two for D'Amico Ryans on the defensive side. So I had them move up, and then I took that slight little trade back. So I'm at 26. I got 2/3 for that, and then picked up a couple extras. And so you'll see there's a nice group where the Seahawks are going to have. Let me just put it on the board here. This is what I came up with. They move back to 26, and then look at that grouping in the third and I think early fourth rounds where they have 4 picks between 76 and 89. That's the kind of quality volume that I want out of this draft. If you can't get into the second round, maybe you'll get into the second round. We can talk about maybe some veteran players that could be moved, but we'll do that at another time. And here I went quarterback for a couple of reasons. At 26, you're in no man's land. You're only going to have 15 or 16 first round grades on players typically. And that's why you see so many quarterbacks go at the end of the first round, because quarterbacks are on a different rating scale. They carry different value. And the difference between taking one in the first round and the second round is you get that 5th year option. Again, as I said earlier, if you don't like the player, plug in your own guy. I am higher on J.J. McCarthy than I know most of you are. And I have had conversations with people, had conversations with some guests at work last night in person. Very knowledgeable sports fans, football guys. And they wanted to talk to me about my podcast. And they wanted to talk about the OC. And they wanted to talk about what I'm hearing and what's going on. And when I said J.J. McCarthy, because we were talking about quarterbacks, they both looked at me like I was crazy. And in talking to them a few more minutes, it became immediately clear that the only reason they don't think J.J. McCarthy's good because they didn't get to see it. Because Harbaugh was so balanced and conservative and old school in the way he operated that offense. If J.J. McCarthy played at a spread school, a Leach school, an air raid school, or plug him into that offense with Ryan Grubb at UW, he throws for 4,000 yards. He's in the Heisman discussion. Wait till you see this guy throw and test at the combine. And he just turned 21 years old. This guy has an elite arm. You just didn't get to see enough of it. But everything you hear, he's incredibly bright. You heard Jim Harbaugh's comments the other day that were obviously hyperbole, obviously ridiculous, and driven by his affection for this kid. That wait until the draft, watch, this guy's going to be the first quarterback taken. That's not going to happen. He's seen as a guy that might need a year or two to sit, maybe the Jordan Love plan. But the last person that Jim Harbaugh spoke that glowingly about was Andrew Luck. I think he knows quarterbacks. J.J. McCarthy, to me, is the perfect guy to take at 26 and have and not have the plan B to play day one. And whether that guy is Geno or Drew or somebody else, Gardner Minshew, whatever, take your pick. The idea is this is an upside play. Some of you might want Michael Penix instead, especially if Ryan Grubb is hired. And we'll talk a lot about this over the next month or two. There are scouts that have a 3rd round grade on Penix. There are scouts who say he may not be on their board because of medical concerns. Our friend of the show and draft expert Michael Thompson puts a Phillip Rivers comp on Penix, which I think is really fascinating. You know, he can move, but he doesn't have that kind of dynamic mobility and athletic ability that you kind of want in the modern NFL. J.J. McCarthy does. I think his upside is greater than Penix, and he's 5 years younger. By the end of his rookie contract, he'll be as old as Penix is now. So if you like another quarterback, fine. But the idea that John Schneider's got to get his guy. He has to. He's got his coach. Hit a home run. I think he got the best guy in the cycle and a superstar in waiting. You got to get your quarterback, right? Now that I've got that done, now I'm going to hand the new coach all sorts of toys. Okay, at 76, McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M, a true zero tech. He and Cam Young can get back together again, right? He is a true 6'2", 320 pounds nose tackle. It's the one thing this roster misses. Ravens played a 3-4. Got to have that guy at the nose. You know, Macdonald can adapt. Maybe it'll be more 4-3. But let's give him a guy that can play in that middle, because that's a weakness on this team. We haven't really seen much of Cam Young. McKinley Jackson is a guy that when you watch Texas A&M tape, this guy stands out. He pops. So does Braden Fisk, who may not be there at 80 now after the week he had at Senior Bowl. Should have been the MVP. The fact they gave it to Spencer Rattler because he went 4 for 4 with the touchdown on one drive before he checked out of the game was absolutely ridiculous. That Senior Bowl was a snoozer. And it was because the quarterbacks chose not to play. Penix chose not to play, which I don't knock him that badly for. I was actually surprised to see him practice all week because national title game wasn't that long ago, and he was beat to hell. Those ribs, I was surprised he even practiced in Mobile. But then Bo Nix, only played one drive. Rattler played one drive. I thought that was strange because Rattler's a guy that stood to gain the most maybe from all those guys. So we saw a lot of Sam Hartman, which wasn't good for his evaluation. Not as high on him anymore. Yeah. But Braden Fisk, who actually was traded from one team to the other on the morning of the Senior Bowl, first time that's ever happened because they were short defensive linemen on one side of the ball, was everywhere. He was just a dominant force. He's more of a guy that he can play 3-4 defensive end. But you can move him around that line. Just high energy, high motor player. He can get after the passer. He's good against the run. You have now just injected that defensive front with two big, long dudes. Well, in Fisk's case, there are some who think his arms are a little short, but who cares? Dude's a player. Right up front where they need it the most to add alongside, what you hope is a rejuvenated Draymond Jones under Macdonald and Jaron Reed, and you get Mike Morris back healthy and Cam Young with another year under his belt. Now you're talking about a pretty exciting front. Okay. At 86, James Williams. I'm wearing my Kam Chancellor jersey today. This guy is about the closest thing physically that we've seen in a long time at the safety position since Kam Chancellor came out. 6'5", 220. You see sometimes his weight's higher than that. It'll be interesting to see how he weighs in at the combine out of Miami. This guy's a massive safety who can play in the box, but can acquit himself well in coverage. And you saw, the reason that he appeals to me is you saw what Mike Macdonald did with Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore. Not as big, but a guy that was a first-round safety. Some felt like was a disappointment, maybe even bordering on bust his first year or two. And then Macdonald kind of played him in that hybrid role and moved him up and had him playing closer to the box, sort of like Devin Witherspoon this year, almost as a nickel back, and was able to affect the game in coverage and in the run game. I think James Williams has that type of upside. Now we got to get some linebackers. Junior Colson at 89, if he's still there, would make all the sense in the world. He played for Mike Macdonald. I think that would be his true freshman year. He's still a very young player. I think he, too, similar to McCarthy, 20 or just turned 21. 6'2", 225, looks bigger than that. physical player, hits hard, takes on blocks, but also can run sideline to sideline. And his best football is ahead of him. Young guy that you can develop with. Every linebacker on the Seahawks roster is set for free agency. And I think with a new coach and a new scheme, I just don't think Bobby Wagner fits. You're not bringing Devin Bush back, most likely. You may want to re-sign Jordan Brooks or import Patrick Queen, who's a free agent from Baltimore. But either way, you're looking to get younger and deeper at linebacker, and Colson would be a dynamic player there. Now you got to address the other trench, and I doubled up here. Layden Robinson played in the Senior Bowl for Texas A&M yesterday. Guy that needs a little work in pass protection, as most of these guys do. These interior offensive linemen coming out of these big schools that play the style that they do. But saw him moving some guys at the Senior Bowl yesterday, and he can get out and move a little bit too. Big dude. That's good value there at 118. And then at 127, I turn right around and take another guard. And if this guy's there in this range, I'm taking him all day long. Zach Zinter, also at Michigan, so Macdonald's going to be familiar with him. This guy would have been a day 2 at worst draft pick if he had come out last year, but he's one of those many Michigan guys that decided to stay in school, come back for another year, and chase that national title. And then in the, I think it was the Ohio State game, wasn't it? Last game of the year for them. Had a pretty severe broken leg. And if his medicals check out, he could be similar to who was the guy that came out of USC last year that blew his knee in the combine that Baltimore actually drafted. So similar mindset there, right? Can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but they basically drafted him to redshirt him. Zinter may be ready sooner than that. But he's a guy that, probably can't play right away as a rookie, but has starter 10-year NFL starter upside. And now you've locked down your guard position. I'm going to go back and get another linebacker, Nathaniel Watson. This dude's built a little bit differently. He's more of the 6'2", 6'3", 235. He's going to be more of a guy that plays sort of forward and north-south, where Colson can be more of your sideline-to-sideline guy. Watching the Senior Bowl, that is one thing that stood out to me yesterday, is this inside linebacker group appears to be much better than last year. And it's full of guys that are more traditional Mike build. Last year there just weren't many of those guys. A lot of undersized dudes. This year there's Colson, there's Watson, there's Trevin Wallace from Kentucky, there's Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State, who's kind of dropped. He might be value here. I thought about taking him at 150 as well. Jackson Sermon out of Cal as a late round guy, looked good in the Senior Bowl yesterday. There's some guys that fit that mold a little bit better. And then at 174, speaking of free agency, Seahawks might be without all 3 of their tight ends that were on the roster this year. 3 of the 4. Brady Russell was also on the roster all year. He'll be back. Will Dissly's under contract, but that cap hit is too much, and they need to save, I think it's $7 million. So they'll cut him probably. I could see them cutting him and then re-signing him. But Colby Parkinson and Noah Fant are unrestricted free agents, and so let's get another guy in there. Brevin Spann-Ford, 6'7". We saw him at the Senior Bowl yesterday. Caught a touchdown from Bo Nix on a tough catch to make for a 6'7" guy to go down to the turf and make a catch like he did. Pretty outstanding. And then I'm going to add a couple more defensive pieces, right? I'll touch on that in a second. I went with a couple hometown guys, one on each side of the ball. Give a little balance for the Apple Cup crowd. Brennan Jackson's a guy that, he's got all the size and the length, and to be a late round edge like he is, just 100% high motor all the time, really high character guy. Don't know how he'll test at the combine. That'll be interesting to see. May not have, some of those elite qualities that teams look for, but just a dude that's probably going to make your ball club just based on effort alone, and he can get after the passer. So to me, that's value all day long in the 6th, 7th round. And then Dominique Hampton, another larger safety, 6'2", over 200, has a similar game to Williams in the sense that they played him up in the box at times, good in run support, but can handle himself in in coverage to be a guy that can play on special teams and a guy you can move around and maybe play some weak side linebacker with. Just thought, never a bad idea to add another safety for special teams alone, but also because you're talking about moving on from your two most veteran safeties this offseason. We'll see about Quandre Diggs, but I think we all agree that Jamal Adams is probably headed elsewhere. So what do you think? How do you feel about that? Now, what I was going to say earlier is I didn't touch the skill positions, really, except for tight end, and that's a need. Playing around with different scenarios, I'll take a guy like Anthony Gould out of Oregon State in the 6th or 7th round sometimes if he's there, kind of a return specialist. I just don't know this receiver group well enough after day 2. I will, but maybe I'll find some late round gems. That there are some guys that I've seen or that someone has brought to my attention that aren't even in this simulator, and I couldn't take guys like that, but just didn't touch that. Running back certainly I don't think is a need. Even if DJ Dallas walks as a free agent, you got Kenny McIntosh who didn't even get to touch the ball last year, so they've got enviable young depth at the running back position there. And now, if you move on from Tyler Lockett this offseason, then I think you're looking at a mid-round receiver, probably adding another young guy. So, that's maybe the only thing that I wish I could have added there. And that's, Brennan Jackson, Dominique Hampton. Those are just, throwing more irons on the fire on the defensive side. See if you can find some players and create some competition. You can easily take a receiver there. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Tweet me as always. Do your own sims and send me the screenshots. Love, love, love that stuff. That's not the right button. There we go. That's a little more aggressive. Nothing new on the offensive coordinator search. Reading the tea leaves, connecting some dots. Sounds like I have heard that Jimmy Sexton, who represents Ryan Grubb, might be really hardballing the Seahawks, trying to get him paid. Word is he makes as much as $2 million at Alabama. And that probably spends pretty well in Tuscaloosa. And so it may be a money thing. Then the Seahawks requested an offensive coordinator interview so that Mike Kafka and Mike Macdonald could talk, and the Giants have blocked that move. Is Tanner Engstrand from Detroit still involved? Is T. Martin potentially a candidate? I've been dragged on Twitter because I passed along information that a couple other people told me that they had knowledge that Grubb might be the guy. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I wasn't reporting it as a professional journalist because that's not what I am. Otherwise, I would handle things a little bit differently and vet my own sources. But we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. And then we'll get a clearer picture, I think, of what the direction of this team might be. But until then, until next time, make sure and subscribe to all the places so that you don't miss out. So wish me luck on my move. We'll see you soon. Thanks for all the support. Huge month in January, 1,000 new subscribers. Welcome aboard, everybody. I appreciate you, each and every one of you. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching.